Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town of Scituate Board of Selectmen meeting this Monday. Well, that's the first question.
Give me one of those mics. Is this one better?
All right. Can you hear me? Now. Okay. This is not a commercial for Nextel. Good evening. My name is John Danahy. I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and thank you for coming this Monday evening for the agenda item that we're here for, the single one. So, from my board, I would accept the agenda that has been posted for August 13th, 2018.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Vignani, seconded by Mr. Harris. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. It's unanimous. First, just so everybody understands, we are not going live with SCTV, I don't believe. Seth, are we? Oh, we are. So it is live through, is it YouTube, Seth, or is it actually through SCTV? Facebook. Okay, so it is being recorded also for future people. If anybody knows anybody who's like, I missed the meeting, it will be on SCTV, the local TV station. As you can see, we also have, I believe it's Fox News, NBC, I think. Am I missing somebody? NES, what's that? WCVB. And I just want to say thank you for coming, because most of the time we see you during our storms. It's nice to see the press here on other issues that are significant to the town of Scituate. In addition to myself, I have my vice chair, Maura Curran. She's to my left. We have Sean Harris to my right. We have Tony Vignani, who's on the other side of Maura Curran. And we also have Karen Canfield. That's the Board of Selectmen here, for those people who might not know us. To my far left is Jim Boudreau. That is our town administrator. And then also to my right, this gentleman right here is John McClellan. John is the Vice President of Tie and Bond. He's also an engineer as well as a PhD. Next to John is Michael Schrader. He is an engineer also with Tie and Bond. They will be doing a presentation in a little bit. To his right is Kevin Cafferty. He is the Director of the Public Works. And to Kevin's right happens to be Sean Anderson. He is the Superintendent of the Water Department. Next to Sean happens to be Eric Langland. And Eric happens to be our Chief Operator at the Water Treatment Plant. And also next to Eric is Mike, and sorry Mike, Quishin, correct? Thank you. Mike happens to be the primary treatment plant operator. In addition, with us we have Representative Joe Moschino up here. Next to Joan happens to be Senator Pat O'Connor. And I also want to recognize the chair, I believe she is. If she's not here, I don't see her, but that would be of our Water Resource Committee, and that happens to be Becky Malamut. I don't know if Becky's here, but I know Martha Cook is here, and she's also with the Water Resource Committee. I also see some other people with the Planning Department, but primarily, if there are going to be questions, we brought everybody here to try to give the best answer and the answers so that everybody here will have an opportunity who ask questions to get an informed response. For an outline for tonight, obviously, I'm just opening up. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on this for what the board has been doing, as well as the history of what's been going on for years. And then, actually, I'm going to turn it over to Tie and Bond, who's going to do a video presentation to explain it in much more detail with respect to the engineering and the problems. I think, and I hope, some of your questions will be answered through the presentation. After that, I'm going to ask everybody, there are 4 mics up here, 2 in the back and 2 in the front. If you have a question, and I'm sure many of you do, please come up, please stand in line, ask the question. We'll endeavor to answer it. And we're going to try to answer all the questions. That's why we specifically picked tonight as opposed to a Board of Selectmen's meeting. I only ask that, number one, if it's a redundant question, you can ask it, but hopefully it's not going to be the same question over and over again. Another request is that we be respectful. There's no doubt people are upset, board's upset with brown water. People are here for a reason, because brown water is still existing. So our methods we may disagree in the application of what's going on, but please be respectful, and we'll make sure that we're respectful too in return. So that being said, I wanted to at least kind of give you a little background as to what the board has been doing, because I think there's a lot of misinformation, not intentional, but misinformation about what has been going on and what we as a town have been trying to do. First and foremost, not just the board, but the town as a whole is committed to fixing and eradicating brown water. That has been a commitment by this board for at least the past 8 years. And it's been a commitment by the town as a whole, but we began to realize it was a major problem about 7, 8 years ago when we're like, what we were doing as a whole, as a town, wasn't getting it done. So, obviously, this meeting's important, and that's why we're here, to discuss this. I will say this, as far as a special meeting, yes, we as a board have not, this isn't the first time we've raised this issue as a meeting. The last meeting we had about brown water was in April, and we brought it up with everybody, but nobody showed up. And that was in response. That's not to say that, you know, people are not informed, but we do bring this up on a regular basis because we see comments, we hear constituents who say, I have problems. We have neighbors who complain about it. We have problems with it. And the last one was in response to the storm of March. A water main broke on Peggotty Beach. It was gone. And it broke loose, and we had to replace it. It caused a lot of disturbance in the system. Prior to that, whenever we have storms or whenever there's a fire, we do bring it up at our meetings. So I don't want anybody to walk out of here and say that we've ignored this and we're just focused on other things. If you go back in our meetings, you will find that we discuss this, if not 3, 4 times a year. So I just want to make sure you're clear on that we are concerned about this, and we together as a town need to work together to improve it. We think we've been making strides. Clearly, many people don't think so. But we need you to cooperate with us in order to find out where the problems are so that we can better address it. So let me just give you a little bit of the background of what's been going on. Our water system was first put into place back in 1893. I'm not going to go through every year, but just to give you a little background, okay? From 1893, private companies started putting in the water pipes. And they continued to do it until 1931 when the town actually bought the water companies and started to do it on its own. Now the reason why I raise that is because pre-1935 cast iron pipes were put into Scituate. And those are the pipes that we see a lot of pictures of, and you're going to see some in the presentation. The problem with the cast iron is that our wells have manganese in it. And when manganese is introduced into the system with cast iron, it creates the phenomenon that everybody's getting, the brown water. And from 1910, 1920, whenever these pipes were put into place, the manganese chemically worked into the iron, and of course, little by little, brown water starts building up within the pipe system. Now, it's intriguing because at one of our meetings, I think 2 or 3 years ago, Kevin came out with the water department regulations that said in 1950, 1, 2, 3, whatever it was, don't complain about the brown water, we're not going to do anything. The significance of it is in the 1950s, they knew they had problems with the brown water. From the 1950s to the 1970s, there was a lot more development and growth in the town of Scituate, more demand for water. And so the pipe system continued to be increased as far as laying down more pipe. Consequently, we had a lot of building in the 50s and 60s, into the 70s. And I suggest that probably it stopped being, shall we say, dealt with because of the cost to take money out of interest rates were going up in the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. My board is not here to level any blame on anything. Town prior boards and town meetings have decided to use money for various reasons. But the reality is the pipes continue to corrode, but build up with all of that brown material. So we get to the 2000s. And the board took the approach of, if there was a problem, we try to replace different types of pipes. $400,000 here, $500 there. And we realized about 2010, the problem with the pipe, the approach we were doing was they were Band-Aids. They were not fixing anything. And maybe some of you might have watched our TV, but there was a woman who lived on First Parish or Common Street, right at the juncture there, who came in along with another person on Third Cliff and said, the water is not getting fixed, it's a problem. What are you going to do? The board then took action and said, listen, these Band-Aid approach of trying to replace pipes with that amount, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 is not enough. What are we going to do? At that time, the DPW recommended that we actually flush the pipes. Open up the pipes, get the hydrants out, and get the water to rush. Now, the significance is that the water system is pressurized. When you turn your faucet on, water comes out. When there's a disturbance in the system, when that pressure's let go, you open up a hydrant. If there's a fire, there's a call, a huge demand, the pressure is now disrupted. There's a massive push through the system. What normally is where your water goes through the system, it just creates the disturbance of all the material, churns it up, and it starts flowing. And the moment you open up your faucet, your shower, you do your laundry, guess what? You're going to get brown water until it settles down. So our flushing program was to open up the hydrants under controlled conditions and try to eradicate those pipes that had the brown water. We found out fast within that year it was not going to work because our water main started breaking, which meant that the pipes were not strong enough to sustain the flushing. So then, between our consultants, our DPW and water department, we decided that we should do something more drastic. We said, why don't we replace the pre-1935 cast iron pipes? And in 2013, we came to town meeting to ask permission to authorize borrowing of money. Now, there was some discussion about why didn't we take it and do an override. We didn't. Because if we did an override, and if you're at your house and you're only using a small amount of water, based on your property taxes, we would make you pay a lot more, even though you were using a little bit of the water. We didn't think it was equitable. So we said we're going to do it through the rates. Our rates were much lower than surrounding towns. So we said increase the water rates is what we did. So the users are paying for the replacement of the pipes. So we did that. And the action plan called for a 3-year replacement of 22 miles of pipe. Now, some of you might remember in 2013 or 2014 and 15, we replaced the first 6 or 7 miles of pipe. Winter came, the roads were scarred because of the process, and consequently, a lot of people started saying, these roads are really bad. I'm getting tire flats, my suspension, this doesn't look good. We did a second year of it. Same thing happened. It got to the point where a lot of people were complaining about the road conditions. Now, the complaints that we were getting at the time annually amounted to, at least in 2013, over 1,000 complaints. What we have is 1,023, 2013, of people calling, complaining about brown water. 2014 and 15, they dropped. 2014, it went to 529. 2015, it dropped to 348. So we thought, based on our pipe replacement plan, we were making sure that we were chipping away at all the complaints for people about the brown water. So we slowed down the process to begin to fix the roads and ensure that people were not going to continue to complain about the bad roads. Not saying we were stopping it, we slowed it down. And I will say the other thing we did was, instead of doing half the road, we said we're going to increase the water rates to pay curb to curb. All the roads are going to be now asphalt, and it's going to be a clean road, not a half paved road. And you'll notice that some of the new roads that were done last year, that were paved just this year, are curb to curb. And that was in response to different people's complaints. So, what came, a 3-year plan turned into a 4-year plan, and this year we bumped the last 2 miles, which happened to be Turner Road, Oceanside Ave, or Oceanside, which is next to Turner, as well as Gannett. That's going to be completed in the spring, starting in April of next year. A lot of complaints are coming from that area. And the one thing that I think people, and you can ask our experts, you can ask our professionals, the irony about the water is, where is it coming from, the brown water? Some people have brand new pipes, and yet they're getting brown water. I live at the Five Corners in Sand Hills. I get my water off Barker Road. My neighbors live on the other side of me on Scituate Ave. They're getting brown water. I didn't get any brown water in July. Go figure. My house could have gotten the water pipe from Scituate Ave. It didn't. It's from Barker. So the difficulty is the flow that goes under subsurface. Sometimes some streets get it, sometimes streets don't. And we're trying to get the information. And I know Bernie's here somewhere, but Bernie went online and suggested to people, hey, tell me, where are the problems? The town has been doing the same thing. You're going to see in our presentation. That was very valuable, and frankly, I thank Bernie for doing it, because we need you not just to respond to Facebook, we need you as a whole to respond to the town, the water department. You need to make phone calls. We've also put it online that if you have a problem, put it online. We need to get it so that we can find out what the problem is and then try to address it. The other issue is that the water mains have been replaced, but the line services that come off the water main that go to your house can also have the same problem with the brown water. And we can't figure that out unless you tell us. So, you know, as I say to you, from a historical perspective, there's been a lot of things that have been going on, and I just don't want people to walk away from here and saying, the board hasn't done anything, that we're ignoring this. We're not. I defy all of you, each and every one of us, get brown water. If you could talk to my wife, how many complaints I get about the brown water prior to getting the pipe replaced last year, I can tell you she's not happy either with our white linens, our white towels, and I know there's a woman here who used to come over and nanny at my house, and I think she could probably attest to the fact that our towels were not white, they were actually dark. You know, that's what goes on. You can ask any one of us. We don't want brown water. None of us do. So I just want to make sure I dispel that from everybody here. This is not like we have levers and we're saying we want you or you or you to have brown water, but we want you not to. It's not the case. The other thing is this. We have spent, in the past 5 years, $27 million, or at least authorized. We've actually spent $21 million. And it's not just the water pipes, okay? There's the source, and there's the causation. The causation are the pipes. The source is actually coming from the manganese and the iron. We eradicate the iron pipes. We also need to address the source, which happens to be the manganese that come from the wells. We're in the process of bringing on another well, and the other well has a lot of manganese. It's on the other side of Tack Factory Pond, off of Old Oaken Bucket. We're going to be putting in a $7 million filtration system to bring that one on so that manganese is extracted, so it can put into our system. We had a well that was actually loaded with manganese, and we finally discontinued it. It's actually near the golf course because it's just too much manganese. The other thing is, I think people need to understand, is that we've also looked to upgrade our water treatment plant. The treatment plant was built in 1967. One of the problems is that we have carbon filters. And the difficulty is the treatment plant continuously runs 24/7. When we get our water supply back from the natural rains, from our wells, we can shut it down and fix it. If we're low on water, we cannot shut down the water treatment plant. So that usually happens in the fall and in early into the winter. So that's a problem. So there's a lot of different problems all the way around this. And if I or anybody on this board could say, tomorrow you got clean water, we would do it in a heartbeat. But it's a much more complicated situation. And that's why I give you a brief introduction. I've gone on for a lot. But I want you to understand that, you know, it's much more complicated. And we've been edifying ourselves, for myself, for a number of years, Sean and Tony, as well as Karen and Maura, because it's not a simple solution, which is why I say to you, we have to work together, and we'll get it done right, and we'll get clean water, but we need your support for it. There are some opportunities, some action plans that we are going to be looking at. For purposes of tonight, the board is not going to take any votes or say we're going to do this, but we want you to talk to us. Maybe some of you have some ideas that actually we hadn't thought of, or maybe we should explore further. But we are going to follow up on this and have another meeting and see what's going to happen after we complete the final 2 miles that we're looking at in the spring. We've got what's called ice pigging, which is what we're going to be sending out in the fall and into the new year, sending in basically a block of ice to try to break through some of the coagulated pipes. And, you know, there's another aspect that we're looking at, which is to do a, what's called a, I forgot the name of it, but it'll come back to me in a second. But basically, an idea, a proper way of flushing once the pipes are completed, because once we're able to complete the cast iron pipes and get rid of the ones that are truly the problem, then we can really open up the gates, flush in the right direction, get the right velocity so that we can be effective in blowing out what remains in the remaining pipes that we have. Aside from that, I think I've talked enough. What I'd like to do now is to be able to turn it over to Ty and Bond to give a presentation. And then, like I said, I'm opening up for questions, so everybody here can ask anything, and we'll proceed from there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Schrader. I'm with Ty and Bond, and we're one of the consultants that works with the town. Can everybody hear me? We're good?
This one work?
That is here, don't touch the mic. Oh. How's this? All right. Sorry about that. Again, my name is Mike Schrader. I'm an engineer with Ty and Bond, and we're one of the consultants that works with the town. And recently, the treatment plant that was just mentioned, we were actually working on that, and we were at the town a couple of weeks ago having a meeting to talk about that project, and we heard about some of the problems that you were having. So, of course, we asked more questions, and we wanted to know more about it. And my colleague John and I, this is what we do. We work with communities to improve and develop plans to improve their water systems. So we've had some experience with this, and we wanted to help. So that's our role tonight, is to talk a little bit about some of the problems. One thing I did want to say is that we're not here tonight, just like the board said, we're not here to present sort of conclusions to a study. This is the beginning. We're here to share some ideas and to talk about some of the issues and hopefully dispel some misconceptions and things about the water and the problems that you're having, because this is quite similar to what we've seen in other communities. And also the reason why we wanted to help is because we get it. You know, nobody wants brown water. It's a very difficult situation, and so that's enough of that. So some of the things we wanted to address head on was to just talk about what we're going to talk about. So the water quality, that's what everybody's concerned about. So there's discolored water. Is it safe? What's being done? You know, I think we've heard that. Trihalomethanes was something that came up, and we're going to talk a little bit about what they are, where do they come from, and should we be concerned? And then manganese, the same thing. What is it? Where does it come from? And should we be concerned? So what we thought was to talk about this, we talk about some background, some causes of the symptoms that you're experiencing, some concerns that have been voiced, actions that the town has taken and plans to take in the future, and expectations, just so that we're all on the same page. So the first one is to think about, where does your water come from? So Scituate has a blended supply. It comes from both surface water and groundwater. And I have to say, to the water department's credit, it's a tricky system to run for a number of reasons. So I showed here the sources, the independent wells that provide the water. So it's roughly 50-50. Surface water, that goes to the Old Oak and Bucket treatment plant. And the rest is groundwater, with that black triangle comes from Marshfield, and that's used to feed one specific part of town, the Hummerock area. So as we talk a little bit, groundwater and surface water are quite different in terms of the nature and the treatability, and they each have their own challenges. When we talk about the trihalomethane and the reasons that happens, that's generally a surface water, versus iron and manganese are generally a groundwater topic. So they each have their own the ways that we treat it and that we produce the drinking water. So discolored water is occurring in many towns in Massachusetts. If you Google, water complaints Massachusetts, you'll see all the communities. I know I saw on TV the other night, I think Hull is having a meeting tonight about this as well. So unfortunately, it is something that happens, and it's fairly common. The other thing that's important to know, at least from some of the stuff we've heard, is it's really important to me as a drinking water professional, and the gentleman down at the table on the far side, that drinking water in Massachusetts, actually in the whole country, it's heavily regulated and it's constantly monitored. We're going to talk a little bit about that because you have a right to know, who's protecting your water sources and what goes on behind the scenes. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Do I need to go back? All right. So the other thing is that John just said, this has been a problem in Scituate for generations. So it's going on. It's not a new thing. And like I said, it's just from our perspective, it's not extremely uncommon to see this. Over the last 5 years, the town has invested heavily in the system. We're going to talk a little bit about that and why you're still experiencing problems. And then, again, just to reiterate, this is a priority for Scituate, and the town's committed to developing and implemented both long and short-term improvements. So, back on the first topic, drinking water is heavily regulated and constantly monitored. So there's regulations, I won't go through a whole lot, but the Safe Drinking Water Act was enacted for the reasons of protecting public health. And that protects the water across the country. It's been evolved over several revisions. Regulations are very conservative, and they're based on the understanding of health risks, and pretty much everything that happens with the regulations and the monitoring is in proportion to that risk. And I'll get to that in a minute. So these regulations are continually reviewed and updated. The EPA is the top authority on this. They're always looking back at the rules and saying, are these still working? What are new contaminants? What are new health risks? What are new, so it's a constantly evolving thing. This is not just done once and moved on. So it's also constantly monitored, and so the town, like every other public water supply in the state, they have a very specific sampling requirement that they have to follow. It's a sampling regimen. Samples are, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Just to give an example, 3,500 samples were taken in the last 5 years. So there's a constant sampling routine for different parameters, from some really exotic things that you only sample for every couple of years to the more common concerns. All the results are submitted to the Mass DEP, even electronically. It goes directly to them. So on the other side of that, at the Mass DEP, there's a set of people that take this very seriously as well, and they're watching and they're reviewing all of these results. And as we're going to talk about with a couple items, the DEP will actually modify your sampling program. So if they see something trending or they're concerned, they're on the phone and they'll say, look, we want you to do more sampling, more monitoring. Or on the other hand, if things start to, to trend down and not be an issue, they might expand that period of sampling so that it's not as frequent. So it's all a very interactive and continuously evolving process. And it's just important to know that there's basically water professionals on both sides of that process that are looking at this stuff very carefully. So we showed, actually, this is just one of the examples. So, oh, and I didn't mention that all the samples are analyzed by a third-party independent commercial lab that is also registered, also certified, and there's really stiff penalties for any kind of, sampling, violations or falsifying data, that kind of thing. There's plenty been examples of that as well. They're prosecuted heavily and aggressively. And this is an example. So this goes right to the DEP in their pre-selected format so that they get this information. And as anyone in the water industry can tell you, if there's anything a little bit off, you get a phone call right away. Oh, sorry.
Okay, he's a ham, you know. So I'm John McClellan again. My professional specialty is distribution system water quality, which is what is at issue here. So I was just going to take a couple of slides and discuss a couple of the water quality concerns that have been raised. And the first one is trihalomethanes, which are not really pertinent to the brown water issue. However, the concerns about them have been raised on social media, so that we wanted to, you know, devote one slide or two here to talking about them. From a regulatory standpoint, these substances are regulated under the Disinfectants and Disinfections Byproduct Rule. It's relatively new regulation. These things were not even discovered until the 1970s, and the regulations were kind of phased in throughout the 2000s. The current regulation has been in effect for less than 10 years now. These things are, the trihalomethanes are regulated on a rolling annual average basis. One of the characteristics of them is that they have seasonal variations. They tend to be most prevalent in the summer months, mostly due to the water temperature. They form much faster and to a greater extent under warm water conditions. And as a result, they're regulated on an annual average basis. I think Mike mentioned already that they are regulated based on a health threat, but these are not a chronic type of a health problem. The health issue that is associated with these is a modest increase in the probability of cancer if one is exposed to high concentrations over a long period of time, over a lifetime. So as a result, they're regulated on kind of a cumulative basis. So there's it's what's called the locational running annual average is how the regulation works. And that regulation basically states that as long as the average of the last 4 periods is under the regulatory limit of 80 micrograms per liter, there's no violation. So, and I should say that Scituate has been so far always in compliance with that regulation. A little more background on them. These substances form as a result of interactions between chlorine, which is put in the water for disinfection, and natural organic matter, which is present basically in all water. The formation of these substances is much more prevalent in surface water, so most of the ones that you would find in Scituate system come from the old Oak and Bucket water treatment plant, as opposed to from the groundwater sources. Sorry about that. They're sampled. Say again? Okay. They're sampled quarterly, 4 times a year at 4 different locations in the town. And then compliance, again, is based on the average of the last 4 samples. So that's basically the story of trihalomethanes. And again, they don't really have anything to do with the brown water issue. Iron and manganese. These do have to do with the brown water condition. In fact, we think that the predominant constituents in the brown water is either iron or manganese. And we heard a little bit about this already, but basically the source of the iron is old cast iron unlined pipes, which have been eliminated to a large extent over the last 5 years or so, and the rest of them will be eliminated in the next few years. The other substance of concern is manganese, and this does come from the sources. And the manganese concentrations in the sources are actually low, and again, they're below the regulatory limits. But the issue with manganese is that it can accumulate over time in the pipes. It makes a black kind of slimy coating on the inside of the pipes. If you let it run without cleaning the pipes for decades on end, it builds up to the point where it can be released if you have a high flow event like In particular, a water main break or a fire, but it will also release under just normal domestic high flows, which is, I think, what's going on in Scituate now. In terms of the health effects of manganese, manganese is currently not regulated based on any kind of a health concern. It's regulated as a so-called secondary contaminant, which means that the issue with it is basically taste and odor, or taste concerns, and the fact that it will stain fixtures and laundry. The limit on the secondary guidance, secondary maximum contaminant level is 0.05 milligrams per liter, and the data that we looked through shows that for the most part, the distribution system samples in the Scituate system are below that level, or close to it but below it. So again, it's not an immediate issue with the source water quality being substandard, by itself, but it's a question of it building up over time and creating coatings within the pipes that can become released and cause problems. Again, the concentrations that we see in the system are typically below the EPA secondary manganese limit. The source of manganese is typically from groundwater as opposed to the surface water. And again, the iron is basically a corrosion product that comes from the old cast iron, unlined cast iron pipes. Okay, here we have pictures of flushing events showing brown water, but I think this is your cue to come back in and talk about things that are going to be done.
So these are actual pictures from the most recent flushing event, where you can see the beginning is that characteristic rusty color from iron in the water, and then you can see that as you continue on the right, it turns clear and it runs clear. So just to finish up on manganese here, it's commonly found in groundwater. Iron and manganese are prevalent in most groundwater sources in New England, in Massachusetts. The dissolved manganese precipitates in the water. So what's interesting with the water industry is it's all a measure of balances. You want chlorine in your water to preserve health in the form of bacterial control, but at the same time, it's the chlorine that causes this manganese to turn from a clear and visible source to this black particulate matter. The iron, sorry, this is a little bit of duplicate of what John just said, but the iron, which is unusual, we expected when we first looked at the data to see it in the source. It's very, very common to see iron and manganese together. Here, when we looked at it, we saw that the sources were pretty free from iron, and what we think is that it's actually coming from the corrosion byproducts of the unlined cast iron pipe. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that again. And when we looked at the data, so one thing that's important to know is that when you call the town to say, I have discolored water, that's not a complaint, that's a data point. So they collect those data points and they take down the time and they take down the comments. So we were looking through those comments to see what the descriptors were. So we saw a lot of red, reddish water, orange water, and that is indicative of iron. And, like we said, we have both here, but that is kind of interesting because it comes from the pipes itself. So, excuse me, some of the pipes in Scituate's system are almost 100 years old, and that's, again, extremely common. The cast iron pipe was laid, it's very, very thick, it's very durable material, it lasts a very long time. And these are a couple of pictures showing that tuberculation, which is the buildup that forms inside pipes over time. And again, you see on the right, that's a really classic iron color. It's a, sort of a bright orange. And these are two pipes that were taken out. So at the DPW, they have a nice collection of these pieces of pipe that were removed. So one of the things that's important to know is that this problem didn't occur overnight, and that's why it's also taking time to fix it. So just a little bit on how did we get here. So it was an old system. It had 110 miles of pipe, which most people don't realize how many miles of pipe there are in their town. There's quite a bit of buried infrastructure. There were 22 miles of pre-1935 unlined cast iron pipe, which is a major contributor of this discolored water. So as John had mentioned, this material builds up slowly over time, and I like to think of it, for an explanation, as sort of like dust. Both the iron and the manganese form this precipitate, these little particles that settle out. So when you all get up in the morning, excuse me, and everybody's taking a shower and doing laundry in a morning, the water's moving pretty fast because there's a lot of people using it, and that stuff is moving along. But then when it starts to get quiet and everybody goes to work, it slows down, and those particulates start to fall out of the system. And that buildup that they described is actually called legacy manganese, and that's because it is a legacy. It takes a long time to happen. Excuse me, one of the issues was that we talked about was deferred maintenance, and John talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Again, we could go into, macroeconomics and talk about that. Very, very common in our work to see communities that are now playing catch up with infrastructure renewal. So again, that's not it's a local issue because you're dealing with it, but it's not unique. It's very common to see that. And before they replaced all the pipe that we did, or that you did, there was concerns in the system about flushing, because when you flush, it's not the amount of water that you use on a Saturday morning, it's much higher than that. So you need to get a velocity that's high enough to scour the pipes and to resuspend all that stuff to push it out. And there was concerns at the time that they would have breaks in some of the older pipes when they would do that, so they were reluctant to flush. The other challenge that Scituate has is that oftentimes there's not enough water to flush. You guys are pretty source, I don't want to say source limited, but you're using, all your sources to supply your demand, and it takes a lot of water to flush, so you've got to time that very carefully. And then again, the Board of Selectmen adopted a proactive approach 5 years ago, and as we discussed, that construction's expensive and disruptive. So this is a little bit about the iron and manganese buildup. It just sort of shows that under the quiescent conditions on the left, this stuff falls out, it settles out, and then under higher flows, especially if there is an incident, which is also recorded, there's sort of expected issues and unexpected issues. So if somebody has to open a hydrant for some reason, or if you have a water main break, you expect the stuff to get stirred up. So they write that in there and they track that. If it just happens randomly in the middle of the day, then they note that too, so you can help diagnose it. This is interesting here. This is your water system breakdown by material. So in 2011, you can see that about 28% of the system was unlined cast iron, which in its time was the material of choice. It was, the cutting edge at the time. You've got a little bit of ductile iron, 15% of PVC pipe, and 53% of AC mains. Now to 218, that ductile is moved up to 22%. So the ductile iron pipe, it's a slightly different metal because they add, gosh, I forget what they add to it, but it's not cast iron, it's a thinner, stronger steel. And they line it, that's the key. They line it with a cement coating so that it doesn't allow that to happen. It doesn't allow the pipe to tuberculate. And now we've got that last little slice of 9%. That's the area that's going to be replaced next. So it's actually pretty impressive. I think it's the first time I've ever seen a community replace all of their unlined cast iron pipe. That was a very aggressive move, and it, not only does it help with the water quality, but it also improves the resiliency of your system and, makes it more reliable. So we want to talk about the strategies to reduce discolored water. So one is, again, this is sort of the dust, right? So there's dust on the floor, if you will. It's in the pipes. We need to get that out of there. So that's the accumulated materials, the immediate cause of complaints. So the town is now started flushing because they can, and is going to continue to flush. They'll be flushing in the spring. Ice pigging is something that's relatively new, and it's something that we've seen be effective. It's sort of an interesting process. I won't go too deep into it, but it's the ice that we're talking about is sort of like coffee culotta ice. It's those little tiny little beads of ice. They're introduced into a water main that is isolated from the system, so it's not affecting the pipes around it, and they build up this mass of ice in the pipe under very controlled circumstances, and when they're ready, they open up the other side, and all that stuff cleans out. So it cleans the deposits, and it scours the pipe as it goes through, and you know, we've seen that be very effective in treating that symptom. Cleaning and lining is a measure that you can use for rehabilitating those cast iron pipes. They're still strong. That stuff's almost an inch thick. You can clean them out and apply a new cement lining to it. And then, of course, replacing the old cast iron water mains, which you're well on your way to doing. The second is equally important, because if you do all that and you don't stop it from coming from your sources, again, it's just going to happen in time over time. So it's sort of a two-part strategy. So we talk about treatment to remove manganese from source water. As I mentioned earlier, we're currently moving into the final design of a new, they call it green sand treatment plant to remove manganese and iron from well 17 that is currently discharging into the reservoir that can now be treated and used directly. And it doesn't, this is long-term and short-term, so that will fix long-term problems. It gives you more water that you can use directly into your system, and it will be, have the iron and manganese removed from it. And the third is to find new sources. So someone brought up an interesting point today that your wells go up to like number 22, but you've only got 5. So over history, there's been many, many, many wells that have been installed and run for a certain amount of time and then shut down for these kind of things, for high manganese. And it's very common for water systems to monitor their sources and to basically either shut down or reserve for emergency use sources that start to have high iron or manganese, because it costs a lot of money to treat it. So if you don't have to, they rely on those sources that don't have that problem more reliably. So now, excuse me, to talk about what they've already done. So on the removing the accumulated material, so they did the first flush. They started flushing, and as you saw that picture, they got a lot of stuff out of it that way. It takes a lot of water, can damage old pipes. Second is to replace the old cast iron pipes. So far, there's been 20 out of the 22 miles replaced, and the last 2 miles is going to go in the spring. Second, remove the manganese from the sources. So like I said, we're moving forward for the design of a filtration plant that will remove manganese at well 17A. We've also recently discussed looking at well 18, which was removed from service because of it's one of the higher manganese sources. Look at treating that. So again, every town, one of the challenges is the wells are never all in the same place. They're spread around, so it's very difficult to do centralized treatment. So you end up with multiple treatment facilities, and again, that's just a characteristic of New England. And then new sources. Last year we installed a new well at well number 22. The existing one had lost some production and had a broken screen, so we installed a brand new well outside of the building to restore capacity there. Dolan Wells is another well field that was originally examined, investigated in the 80s, and then now they're bringing it to fruition, bringing that online, and that's being evaluated right now in the field, and they're doing test wells. And also, reservoir expansion is under development, and that's another, tricky part of the system of managing a surface water reservoir with required releases. So this is a map of the pipes that were replaced, and you can see that those are the, sort of like the arteries, the main arterials of the town. Those were the pipes that were the pre-1935 cast iron pipe. And like I said, $19 million of old rusty pipe has been replaced since 2014. And at the bottom, this is what the new pipe looks like. You can see it's a thinner wall, but it's got that inner lining, and that's what protects the water quality in the future, prevents the buildup of tuberculation. So this is, oh wow, you actually can read this. So this is a list since 2013 of all the different projects that the town has done. And right here you can see one of them was they replaced the carbon at the old Oak and Bucket treatment plant. And one of the things we talked about with the trihalomethanes was that organic carbon. And that immediately increased the removal of that organic carbon from that source. And, which will should directly help with that. So, like John had said, 21 million out of 26.9. Next phase moving forward. But so here's the rub. Why do you still have problems then if you've replaced all this pipe? And it's important to remember. So first of all, these are the dots, are the water quality complaints that the town receives. So they log them in. We geo-referenced them onto a map to see where they are. And you can see the magenta lines are the pipes that have been replaced. The blue ones, the smaller ones, are the pipes that are not. Those are the older pipes. So what happens is this stuff that builds up in the mains, the iron, there's a number of sources around town, so the water's moving, and it's taking that particulate with it. So this pipe, for example, is a transmission main. It's serving, one of the backbones of the pipe. It serves all the pipes that go off of it, right? So that material goes down those pipes too, because it's going to the houses that it serves. So when we talk about it settling out, it settles out in those pipes too. So it's kind of distributed throughout the whole system. So what happens when you replace a pipe, you saw that pipe that's all the way down to nothing, and when you replace that with a brand new pipe, that changes the flow, it changes the velocities, it changes the ability of the water to go through, but you're still having complaints in here because those pipes are still have that stuff in them. And that's why we're talking about the flushing and the ice pigging, because it needs to be cleaned out of those as well. So just fixing this pipe doesn't mean that you won't ever, and you have a couple complaints here. It could be transported from somewhere else. It could be, it's not a, how do I say it? It's not, like if you have a spot on your garage and you paint it, you fix that spot. It's kind of more of a system-wide thing, which is why we're talking about system-wide solutions. So this is, again, this was the total number of customer complaints by year. So this stuff is tracked. You can see in 2013 it was pretty big, and that's right when that program started. And we've seen pretty much a steady decline. Now, as John had mentioned, we want to see that down to nothing. But right now, that's where we are. We're still getting these complaints, and that's why we're talking about these solutions. So in terms of next steps, again, this is thematic, right? So it's the same three basic things. Continue removing accumulated material from the water mains. So the flushing will continue. The town will notify you, and when you flush, you can expect to stir up stuff. They're going to start ice pigging this fall, this winter. We're going to get the money at the fall town meeting, and hopefully, and move forward with that. And that's more of a targeted solution. It's not the system-wide flushing. Remove the manganese from the sources. So the next steps is to fund the construction for well 17A at the filtration plant, the green sand plant. And then, if necessary, fund a design for treatment at well 18B. And the reason why we say if necessary is because you have to look at the whole picture, and you have to look at all your different sources, and is it worth building a plant there versus finding a new source versus, it's there's a lot of elements that go into the analysis. This, by the way, is a sample from an actual ice pigging operation, and they collect these samples at the end, and you can see in the middle there, it's pretty dark, and that's that stuff being removed, sort of instantly from that particular pipe. So it's nice in that it's a very localized treatment, and it does a pretty good job on that. So lastly, I didn't know if, well, I guess I'll just keep going, but in this discussion, the town reached out to the Department of Environmental Protection, which is, they're the ground, level for the EPA enforcement. and asked them for a summary, and this is an excerpt from that. And well, I think everybody can just read it themselves. It's kind of long, I won't read it, but basically saying that there's no violations of primary drinking water standards between 2013 and present. That's where that number came from, the 3,500 sampling data points over the last 5 years. And there's just a closing statement. These are enforceable standards established to ensure public water supplies are safe, further protecting the public against consumption of drinking water contaminants that could present a risk to human health. So that is my last slide.
Michael, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So now I'd like to turn it over to questions. Hopefully some of these questions, we've given you some information, and I just submit to anybody, please come on up, and we'll start going through them.
Sean, can we say a few things first?
Sure. Tony, would you like to? Sure. Take this.
Thanks. So just a few other points. There's a lot of information has been sent out to you, but there were 2 or 3 things that I think I know are accurate that I want to tell you beforehand that weren't mentioned today. One of them is a lot of people get brown water in the summer, and that is because our water use almost triples during the summer, which, as everyone mentioned, the flow changes. So we use about 1 million gallons a day in the non-summer months, and in the summer months we use over 2.5 million gallons a day. So that causes disruption, and that's why most of you people, including myself and the 4 of us, see it in the summer more than others. One other thing, most of the problem, one quick comment. So I can't remember who mentioned it, maybe Mike mentioned about the testing. The testing's done by the 3-month on the end of the table there, and testing is done, he mentioned something quarterly. Testing's done daily, weekly, and monthly, and all of these water samples are sent to an independent source. They have no idea. They're sending a little vial of water, what it is. They come back and they tell us what the results are, and then we send those results to the DEP. So it's completely confidential, secure by a third-party source, and it's tested daily. The last point that I just wanted to bring up is the distribution channel. So we have, it's kind of a double-edged sword. First of all, we fixed 22 miles of pipe, but there's 110. So there's 70–80% of our system that we haven't fixed, that has been neglected for 50, 60, a lot of money was not put into the infrastructure of our water system for decades and decades. And the double-edged sword is, as we fix it, so all of a sudden you've got a new pipe coming on that used to go through a hole about the size of a quarter. Now it's going through a hole the size of a watermelon, so the flow is a lot harder now going through those areas that we fixed, hitting those pipes that may have been further along down the line that are coated with this brown guck that gets into the water system. So as we fix areas, it increases the flow to the exterior areas that are where the houses are and disturbs the water even more. So those are just a few other things that I thought that you guys should know.
Thank you, Tony. So, without ado, then, I'd like to start questioning, if that's all right. Actually, I'm going to start with the lady over here to my left, if you don't mind. If you could just identify yourself and your address, please.
Sure. Sorry. Can you hear me? My name is Kate Fardank. I live at 10 Pinebrook Lane here in Scituate. I own a home in Scituate. I work in the harbor. I have a son who is a student at Cushing and a daughter who will be going into the public school system in a few years. My parents both live here in Scituate and are coming of the age where they will benefit from a brand new senior center. I'm telling you all of this because I want you to know that when I'm saying I'm concerned about the water or development in our town, it's not just because I have a little bit of skin in the game. All of my skin is in this game. Every part of my daily life is affected by the decisions that you all make every day, especially about our water. My water is not as brown as some other people's in the town, but that doesn't mean everyone doesn't deserve to have clean water. I actually live on a street that I was recently told is a fixed area. The head of the DPW spoke with my dad, who I'm sure you've all seen, Mike Higgins, posting on Facebook. He said that my street has clear water. I have a picture on my phone from about 30 minutes ago that my husband took while trying to give my kids a bath, and it looks like someone peed in my bathtub first. I'm going to send my son to a school in a few weeks, and I can't guarantee that he can take a clean bath the night before. There's been a lot of talk about what we're going to do for the water starting in the spring. I want to know what we're going to do now. What are we going to do for the people like Andrea, whose water looks like chocolate milk? What are we going to do for the people the seniors of this town who want to take their medication and can't use the water coming out of their tap? We're going to build them a senior center, and we're going to tell them, but buy bottled water. We're going to build a sports complex and pump what through that water? Through the pipes in that sports complex? Dirty brown water? Where is this testing coming from? Is the testing being done at people like Andrea, who has posted her pictures on Facebook, her house with her dark brown water, or the golden water at my house, or is it being done at the DPW plant, which we've already acknowledged isn't what's in dire need here? We keep talking about testing, but without a lot of information. My last question, other than when, how, is these gentlemen who just gave a great presentation and a lot of information, why do we need them? We have a water department, we have a DPW. Why are they planning where our water's going? You said back in the 50s, I believe you said the town bought the water back. How much are we paying them to plan out how we can get clean water?
Well, thank you for your questions. I'll try to address a few of them, and if I miss some, we can go through them. If I'm not mistaken, I think you were questioning our DPW and the water testing. And the reason why the consultant here is the consultant has been involved since the past 5 years. In addition, if you're going to question our DPW, the consultant who's been hired, who's also have credentials and their certifications, are also just telling you the way it is also. So we're trying to at least be transparent. We're giving you all the information. Again, you want clean water, we want clean water. We need to work together in order to accomplish it. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not like I can turn the switch or anybody on this board can say, clean water to you, clean water to the lady who posted all that dirty water. But what we need is, we need to work together, we need to go out, we need to get the DPW to go out and take a look at it and work with you, as well as trying to figure out how are we going to send out our engineering, which we need to put it to a public bid. We're doing that to get the best people for the cheapest amount, to do the right job, and to make sure that we can start it. We can't put shovels in the ground tomorrow. But this is the whole point, this is the reason why we're meeting here today, is because we actually planned on doing it within 3 years, and people complained. Just like now you're complaining that we're not doing it quick enough. People are complaining we're doing too much because it's ruining their ride to work and the roads and everything else. So now we're like, let's get it done.
No, sir, I'm sorry.
Excuse me,
I don't think it's fair to say.
Excuse me,
but
please.
You can't keep talking about roads.
Listen, I gave you a chance. I'm trying to explain the questions.
Go
here,
ahead.
Okay? So
you haven't answered any of my questions, though. You're just saying you're waiting.
Dialogue. I just want to make sure it's clear. We are here to try to answer questions. We cannot talk over each other. I will give you a chance to respond.
Okay.
But if you're going to talk over me,
no, I just want you to answer my question.
So let's just go back and forth here to at least try to address your questions, okay?
That would be great.
Okay. So as I said to you, we are in the process of trying to figure out how to get it started again, and that's why our plan was to do it in the spring. We can't do it in the middle of the winter. Turner and Oceanside are next to the seawall. We have storms, as you very well know, with the cobble coming over, with the sand coming over. It's dangerous to start it between the hurricane seasons, which actually start now, but generally it's from December until March. That's when we have all these problems. We can't open up the water lines and have all that damage. So we're constrained with how we're going to do it in those locations.
Okay.
So it's not like we're ignoring it.
Can I ask you a quick question about that timeline? You said you can't do it during certain times. He showed a picture of them flushing in February. So what was done this spring? Because you said you've been actively working on it for the past 5 years.
Correct.
So
We've
what
been
was done in
flushing.
this past spring about our water problem?
We were flushing the pipes during the spring, and many of you, if you looked at the DPW, would see the signboard saying flushing. Different people, we put it on our website, we're flushing.
Okay.
And so we can do it. We can't do the flushing now because the water is now going down.
Was there any pipe replacement this past year?
No, there wasn't.
Because we haven't done the full,
The pipe
that was allotted in the
replacement was
past
put
5
off-
years, is that
The
correct?
pipe replacement has been put off until next year. And one of the reasons was
But
is
why?
that people who live on, I'm explaining it. The pipe replacement on Turner Road presently has a gas main that's being replaced. We were not going to have the pipe water, doing the digging on the water when the gas company said we need to replace Turner and also Oceanside. So they're in the midst of still completing that.
And that
was the reason why it was delayed, because now once that's done and it's safer to be able to dig around a gas pipe that they had said that it's a problem, now we're going to be digging that up.
when
And
did
as
the
far-
gas leak begin? I don't live on Turner Road. I'm honestly just don't know the
Okay,
answer to
I
that.
want to answer one other question. I want to turn, you said about the testing, because I want Sean Anderson to at least tell you about the testing, because I want to debunk this that we are cooking the books or doing anything. It is a very regulated area with the testing of the water. And I'd like Sean Anderson, the superintendent of the water department, to address it. If you're not going to believe us, there's nothing I can do other than saying you can see the books, we'll take you down and give you a tour of the water plant, you can even look at the data, we'll give it to anybody who wants it. That's why I'm trying to say,
I don't
it's
think anyone
transparent.
doesn't believe you. I think the problem is we've had a company up here speaking to us all night. We want to hear from our water department. We want to hear from the people that are working
I just
for our
said I'm going to turn
town.
it over to Sean Anderson. So if you give me a minute, I'm going to give Sean Anderson to address your question about the testing. John?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sean Anderson, Water Superintendent. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Our sampling schedule is given to us by DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, with very exact locations on where we take the samples and when we take the samples. As I said earlier, we take some daily samples, we take weekly samples, we take monthly samples, and we also take quarterly samples. There's also some sampling that we're on a waiver for, so we only take them once every 3 years. In terms of locations out in the system, if you want to know exact locations, I'm just going to turn it over to Eric Langland. He takes all the water samples in our system, and he can give you a better idea of where out in the system he takes the samples.
Can you hear me? Okay. Like Sean said, all the sampling locations and all the sampling frequencies are set by the DEP, and they're usually set on a 3-year schedule. And if there's anything, and all of the samples that are taken are based on samples that were taken when the substances were first regulated. So any change that we make to our system, for example, they talked about the new well 22. I got an updated sample schedule from the DEP when that well went online, because that's a new source, so that's sampled much more frequently now. But the sampling locations are located all throughout town. For example, sampling for total coliform, for bacteria sampling. I'm out there once a week doing bacteria sampling, and while I'm out there doing that, I'm also taking chlorine residual to make sure it's still present in the system. And the sampling sites range from the North Scituate Housing Authority near Cohasset border to the U.S. Coast Guard Station, down at Village Market, up at the old Minot Fire Station. The storage tanks have samples taken directly from them. So the samples are spread out all over town.
Thank you.
And they're, like I said, for different substances that we're testing for, there's a different amount of locations and there's different frequency of the samples. But representative samples are taken throughout all corners and all sections of town.
Thank you.
That
I don't think
helps.
that was made very clear, and that's what everyone was wondering. So again, I'm just going to ask, why aren't we starting this sooner than the spring? You've mentioned the roads, you've mentioned a lot of different things we're spending money on, and I've mentioned 2 big things that we've agreed to spend money on that, yes, absolutely are well-deserved. But why is this taking so long?
If I could take that, there's a short-term and a long-term. The pipe replacement has to be, we just have to finish permitting that, put it out to bid. We can't do it in the winter because it's on Oceanside. We just can't be working down in the wintertime with the storms and everything. So that'll take place in the spring and the summer. In the short term, we have about $80,000 right now on hand in our water budget that we are going to put towards the ice pigging that we talked about, going to some of those really bad areas of town, trying to clean those out. Unlike you or a business, I cannot pick up the phone and say, hi, ice pigging company, please come in and do this work for me. I have to develop a set of specs and put it out to bid. We will do that as quickly as we possibly can and get that started as early as we can. And then in the fall town meeting in November, we will seek additional funds to do even more, and we will do that as soon as we can. But we will do something in the short term. It's just under the laws that we operate, I can't pick up a phone and have someone come in tomorrow. I have to go through a bid process. So we will do something in the short term. The pipe replacement will be in the spring, because anybody who lives down the Oceanside knows we can't do a construction project January, February, March in Oceanside, because at times Oceanside is the ocean. So that project will be in the spring.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gentleman here in the front, please.
Dave Doherty, 122 Gilson Road. I'm still trying to summarize in my own mind the technical presentation that was made earlier by the gentlemen from Tyne and Bond. The way I see it, and it may be the way I understand it, and perhaps they can tell me whether this is right or wrong. The only thing that causes the brown water is the manganese interaction with the iron in the iron pipes. So therefore, only the unlined iron pipes cause the problem at this time. Otherwise, there might be an accumulation from past brown sludge or whatever it is, but any further brown is caused by interaction from this point on. So if we replace the 9% of unlined iron pipe and then properly flush everything, the problem would be gone. Is that correct?
Michael Schrader, did you hear that?
I did.
I'm looking for an end in the sense like pipe replacement. What exactly has to be taken out? You're saying the unlined iron pipe, the 9% that's left, that's causing the problem because of the manganese interaction.
Okay, so the manganese, there was a slight misunderstanding there. The manganese comes from the sources and it deposits in all the pipes. The iron that we talked about is a corrosion byproduct of just regular water interacting with the iron. So it's not specific to the manganese isn't specific to the iron pipes. It's universal across
I thought it was a reaction between the manganese and the iron that causes the brown.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. That's not correct. The manganese reacts with the chlorine in the water and it deposits.
I see. Oh, okay, now I understand.
Rusty pipes rust, so.
I understand. I was going to say, well, if that's the case, why do we have to have the manganese reduction if you clean the pipes up? I understand. Thank you very much.
The gentleman up back, please.
Hi, Andrew Goodrich, Longley Road. I actually have more questions now than when this meeting started.
One thing I'd like to do is this. The lady asked a number of questions, and I'd like to make sure, maybe one or two, because then I'd like to open it up for other people, but I'd ask you to stay in line so that we can come back again. Otherwise, if we have like a number of questions, it's kind of unfair for people who have been standing up. So I'll give you two, and then what we'll do is then please get to the back, and then we'll go from there.
It's going to be really
Thank you.
Quick here. There's no possible way that with a $20 million project that we didn't know, not complaints, because we wouldn't govern by complaints, that would be chaotic. How many homes precisely when this project started had brown water? Do we know today how many homes have brown water? In the year 2020, do you know how many homes will have brown water? If we don't know that, and I guess I should first, I also don't know who the project manager is to address that to, and I'm also concerned when I do go to pick up my my rust. There's a breathtaking lack of interest of what my address is for where that is. I am pretty sure most people get a water bill, and we could say yes, we have brown water on that. That would be a pretty quick way for all of us to say yes, we have brown water or not, because everybody gets billed. I've never seen that. I'm also very curious how many corporate grants that this board has applied for, how many nonprofit water quality grants. The town of Palmer, Mass. just got a $2 million grant from the Community Development Block Grant Program. So I'm sure that we've done everything, even though we've also heard that they just admitted to deferring maintenance because of complaints. How many exact grants have you applied for? Because there's at least over 20 that I can find. And if the answer is 0, I'll be very disappointed. And just finally, my last question, if we're talking about funding, would it be true, and this is on a funding issue, if the town were to leave the Community Preservation Act, whether or not that surcharge, the 1.4 million that we get, does the town get about 1.4 million per year? So if we got out of that program for 5 years, that would give us, if again we turned it for an override, there'd be no impact on taxpayers, and that money could be about $7 million over the next 5 years to help solve, to get to the 9 million that we could do. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Kevin and/or Sean to address the first general questions dealing with the total number today and the anticipated in 2020. And then, Kevin, I'm going to ask you to take a look at the grant issue. The CPC is a whole policy discussion. That's a good question. We've addressed that with other areas about funding other sources. I think that's more of a general issue for the town to address with respect to, shall we say, foregoing CPC funds for maybe 5 years. It's a very good question. I think that's a valid question that people in this auditorium can consider. That's a town issue that we have to take to town meeting. And as far as the billing, I want to address it. I think that's a great question. The issue that we want to know are data points, complaints I call it, but they call it data points. If that's one way of getting responses to find out who's getting it and when, the more information we get, the better it is. I think that's a great question. So Kevin, can you address the other two, please?
Sure. Can you hear me? First of all, any grants that we see available, we typically go for. If the town of Palmer went for a grant that we didn't know about and you happen to know of 20 grants, by all means, let us know about them also, because we'll gladly apply for them. Any sources that are available, we typically go for. There are different grants and evaluations of your water sources, other areas that we have gone for and got. I don't have an exact list for you right now, but if you want to come in the DPW office, we can show you what we have and what we've gone for. Not a problem. The other question was about data points and where to get the data points. Is there something we could do on the bill? The bill's done by a munis system, so it's a little bit independent. It's not that easy of just checking a box on the munis system. But we have set up, the town administrator's been working on setting up a box on the website where you can click in, just log the complaint, click in. It's like a Survey Monkey setup that we can track all the complaints that we have, and we can go forward with those. You know, and with the complaints, as people have said that are here, we'd like detail on it too, and there's a box where you can write comments, not just brown water, yellow water, so that we know what you're getting. Because as you've seen tonight, there's a big difference between orange water and black water. So if we're tracking one particular substance and going after it, we have to know where it is and what we're going for. Because if we're going to flush, we might flush a lot more aggressively for manganese as opposed to iron. So that's a difference. Did that help, or is that?
Yeah. So year 2020. I mean, what's the end date? That's the only with that. Which any clarification would be on that. I think a lot of folks. That's it.
You know, it's something we're always going to be fighting with, manganese, because it's always coming out of your sources. You're always getting some manganese out of the system. It has to be managed better with the flushing system, and we're hoping we're going to get a lot of that out of there. And we're also going with the green sand filter. By having the green sand filter, we're hoping to take 98% of it out before it gets into the system and eliminating it from the source, if that helps for the question.
Gentleman to the left here.
Yes, how are you? My name is Patrick Kearney. I live at 18 Lighthouse Road, and I was watching the presentation, but I had read a bunch of studies, and considering there is an increasing number of studies that say that manganese is actually a public health risk, and that actually in some studies has pointed to hindering early child development. I was wondering if the Board of Selectmen had worked with any of our state legislators to amend the acceptable amounts of manganese in our water source from the Mass DEP.
I mean, that's not a legislative set point. That's a regulatory. DEP and EPA set that. As you said, it's a constantly evolving point. What I can tell you is our well with the most manganese in it, well 18, we have taken offline. And then we are developing the green sand filters for each of our wells. So when they are online, the manganese is coming out of the water. So we acknowledge that there's a manganese issue, but the regulatory process will determine whether or not they raise or lower those levels. We're trying to manage the manganese on our end and get as much out of the system as we can.
Have you worked with trying to amend the acceptable amounts of manganese in the water source?
Again, there's no one for us to work with. That's done by DEP and EPA over time,
So
based
you could
upon
work with
studies and like
DEP,
that.
right?
We work with DEP every day. We talk to DEP every day. They sample us. DEP keeps a pretty close eye on what we do.
Hopefully our legislator who gets voted in November will take that up. I realize that two people are here,
hopefully
maybe
it's me.
a third who might, so I appreciate your input, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr.
The gentleman down here in front here, if you have a question.
Chris Karsha, 119 Stockbridge. Point of clarification, a lot of times when this comes up on social media, we talk about total cost and $1 million per mile of pipe replacement. In the end, are we looking to replace every inch of pipe in this town, or is there, a maximum amount? So when we do talk about this, we're not saying there's 100 miles left and it's going to cost us $100 million. What kind of pipe, number are we looking at there?
Thank you, Chris. Kevin, I'm going to throw that to the Director of Public Works. I'm happy to answer it, but you know what? I'd rather have him with the superintendent tell us directly.
We're not saying every pipe has to be replaced. But remember, every pipe, there's a lifespan for every pipe. So if a pipe was put in the 40s or 50s, the lifespan might be 70 years on that pipe. So as we approach the age that we've reached the useful life of these pipes, we have to seriously consider keeping up with them. A lot of the lines that we have are undersized. They might be a different substance that's not a contributor to iron or manganese, but if they're undersized, it can affect fire flow, it can affect the water quality to the different houses, and it's just going to break more and more. And that's why we have to stay proactive. So, for example, the pipe at St. Mary's was, I think it was 1904. We got our life out of it. We couldn't get much more life out of it. It had more leaks in it than you can imagine. And it was causing a lot of problems down the harbor. Since we've replaced that, I know the fish market, we've had a lot less calls. They were always having ice problems. And that's the key, staying on top of it, because you don't want to be hit with a burden. As a minimum, I'd say we have to do a mile a year. As a minimum. If you do 1 mile a year, at the end of 100 years, the average age of your pipe will be 100 years. So, what is the best number? 1 mile a year, two miles a year? We have to judge what our infrastructure age looks like and then go forward. And that's one of the things that we do. We've got everything documented. We know the age of 98% of our pipes. We're going after a couple other areas. We have other pipes that were installed 50, 60 years ago that are undersized. There might be a 2-inch galvanized line. Now it's galvanized, so it's, you'd say it's not rusting or not causing any problems. But there's been houses and houses added on to that line. So now you have 5 houses or even 10 houses on a 2-inch line. You have to say we should update that so that we can get a hydrant on that street, and so also that people don't have to call each other when they take a shower. It's just the way it was done in the past, and we're looking to improve it. I hope that helps.
Two ladies here. I think this lady was up first, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't see back there.
I'll defer to her first. The lady in the back, please.
Hi, Amber Ahern on Longley Road. I posted a bunch of pictures I'm sure people have seen. I know it's the same story that everybody has. I understand this isn't different. I understand the problem. It's the pipes. But what's going to be done today? Why am I paying the same amount of money for this water that neighbors are paying for clean water? What's the answer when I call the water department and they just send me a case of water and tell me that that's the answer, but I'm still paying the same bill? Why am I paying my water for this? It's black.
So I really wanted to respond and ask you more questions. I'd actually like to talk to you. I don't know whether or not you contacted the water department and spoke to them, because when I saw the pictures, I thought to myself, is that happening Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Did it happen last week? Because I had a lot of questions on it.
It's been 3 years. It's been 3 years, and this black isn't, once a year. This is,
And the question I had is like, through the process of the pipes, of the replacement, I was curious, like, is it getting better through the process? And that's where I'd say to you that, frankly, my position on it is then I'd like you to bring it to the water department, give it to the complaint, because I think the thought is, as water commissioners, I personally think, no, you should have an abatement on that.
Yes.
If you're getting bad water all the time, then I'm certainly willing to consider it and fix it. And that's why I say to you, from my perspective, and I think the board, we're not here saying you got to pay for bad water. If you go to a restaurant, you expect good service. If you go to a retail, you don't pay for bad service, and we don't want that either. So I'm certainly open to saying, if there is, yes, you shouldn't, and happy to deal with that. And that's why I'm glad that you talked to the water department, because frankly, I know there was another person, I know they're here, looking around, continued to complain, and we've been trying to address the water issue with them. And that's why I'm saying to you, yes, I certainly would consider that. I see no problems with that.
The complaints as well. I saw the chart of the numbers going down. I also don't believe it's completely accurate, because we complained in the beginning, and then after so many complaints, we just stopped complaining and just started doing it ourselves.
Again, we as a town are only as good as the sum of its pieces. If people don't want to complain, there's not much that we can do and get the information. And that's why I say to you, please, this is not just, it's our problem collectively. And I'd say, please, tell us, because that's why we need to continue to work on it to improve it.
I wish that same communication would go to the whole water department, because when we go down there, they just say, yeah, that's dirty. And that's all they say.
I'm happy to come down to your, personally, anybody else, another person from the board, happy to go down and talk to the whole neighborhood. Because I'm like, that's what we want. That's what we're here for.
That would be great.
And if that's the case, I'm willing to go down and deal with that and talk to them and make sure that if you're getting it on a weekly, daily basis, give us the complaints, and guess what? I want the water department to go down, I want the superintendent, so we can address that and try to figure out, maybe it's a problem that's one of the situations, maybe it's a pipe, maybe whatever it is, we're going to find it out for you.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Kevin, did you want to say something? Sure.
So if I can just address that, I just want to bring up two things. One, if you do have chronic brown water problems, or you are experiencing a phase of brown water, come down to the water department. We do have bottled water for people. If people are having that as an issue, we'll help out with that. Also, if you have a specific problem and you don't feel comfortable if the water department is taking care of it, ask to speak to the superintendent. And I know Sean goes out on a regular basis to different houses and tries to address this with people and tries to find out the best way to do it. And if that's not working, come and see me. I'll come out and I'll see what I can do, and we'll try to come up with a plan. Maybe it's a replacement of a line. Maybe it's a connection. Maybe it's looping a line, but we'll come up with something and we'll try to eliminate it. Thank you.
One other thing is, in anticipation of today's meeting, we actually put together a log for people to put their name, address, email. If you haven't called, if you haven't dealt, when you're like, I'm getting it, and I believe, Lorraine, is it in the back at the end? It's a table outside. So when you came in, there was a table. We just ask you before you leave, fill out that, we're going to take it. If you haven't already notified the water department, and frankly, if you have and you want to do it again, I just ask you to do that, okay? If you want, it's up to you. This lady right here, please.
Ann Dickinson, Country Club Circle, lived in had the same house in town since '65. I can count on one hand the number of times I've ever seen brown water, so I come to this from kind of a point of ignorance and lack of sophistication as well. The first information I've really heard statistic-wise is right here tonight. So this is just totally, ignorant in some ways. However, it seems to me that somebody in the town should have devised some kind of a chart that anybody can come and get and just go, today it was this brown, on a scale of 1 to 5, today with that, I just thought of that while you were just talking. Why can't that be available instead of odds and ends of people calling in at different things and complaining with different degrees of outrage? Just chart it. You have some responsibility for gathering the data. You can't just say, well, we don't have the data from you. You haven't created I'm talking from the standpoint of a 33-year teacher. We do this from 5th grade through 8th. That's the grades I've taught. But if you show them how to make a data chart, But that's not my question.
No, but let me just address that, and then I'll give you the question, okay? The problem is the water is clean when it comes out of the treatment plant and gets into the system.
That's
and then,
fine. I'm not saying that you're responsible for that information, but you're responsible for gathering accurate information. I never knew this was going on, really, until the other day when someone said there was going to be...
I agree, but if you have brown water, and first time I've met you, where you live, I don't know how to contact you to find out unless I know it.
No, but you can say we have piles of these charts, come get as many charts as you need.
Sure, happy to do that, if that works.
At the dump, put them at the dump, whatever.
Sure,
That's what, sorry,
if that works,
transfer
be
station.
happy
I'm
to.
sorry, transfer station.
So
But anyway,
dump, or what?
my question is, having just heard all this stuff now for the first time, in the colonies here, there must be some other communities that have the same issues that you've explained, unless we're doing something terribly wrong here. And I'd just like to know comparatively, can you give some information, maybe you guys could, about what other places have a comparable problem? And the other part of that question is, from what I understand from what you're saying is, from what I've heard tonight is, theoretically, since the pollutants and stuff, the level has been okayed, I want to know, with the same degree that we know about the Charles River, number one, can we swim in it? Can we eat the fish from it? Can we drink the water? It's brown, so what? That might not matter. Is this water okay for these people to be cooking with, showering in? I mean, I don't know. I can't believe they've been dealing with this for 3 or 4 years, whether it's 5 days a week, 2 out of weeks, months, whatever. It sounds like many years people have had. I knew people had brown water when they flushed the pipes in their area, but then it went away when it was done. I'm saying here, what the heck is going on here? And is it safe to use that water? From your standpoint, it sounds like it is.
So let's deal with the last issue first and then go from there. Kevin and Sean, can you address the issue about fishing and comparisons to the Charles River and the safety, if you can? I don't mean that as in a mean way. I'm just saying the concern of a safety. I want to make sure we get that clear here.
Obviously, as we've spoken about earlier, all the samples that we take all come back within the DEP guidelines. However, when there are disturbances in the system and you do get that discolored water, we would ask that you just use your best judgment. Slightly brown water is just slight elevation of iron. There is no health risk to that. The blacker water is more indicative of manganese, and there is emerging evidence that there could be some more complications with that. So that would be something that I'd be a little bit more careful with. But again, all the samples that we take, and as Eric said, it's spread all throughout town. Some of the samples, when he takes them, are discolored when they go to the lab, and they still come back as being in compliance. So I can't, without knowing exactly the color of the water, I can't answer definitively to each person. Is there a second?
Kevin, if you can just address the comparative towns.
Oh, sure. No, there are comparative towns. Obviously, Hull's been in the news recently. The reason we picked Ty and Bond, or we got involved with Ty and Bond about this, is they've dealt with some other towns. I mean, we don't want to throw other towns under the bus also, but they did a big program in Webster where they helped clean up the water there, where they had a lot of problems. And these guys shortchanged themselves a little bit. I mean, John's a PhD, and he wrote his, one of his major theses on clean water and how to clean it up. So we did bring in some specialists here that have a lot of experience in this to try to eliminate the solution. It is a big problem, and we're looking for the best way to clean it up and fix the whole issue.
I'm going to go to the lady in the back here, please.
Thank you. Sandra Cook, 29 Bridge Ave. Thanks. 4th of July was a disaster at my house, but thank goodness the 8 guests were family members. Brown water, no showers, no beach towels, no towels, cooking, the whole thing. So shortly thereafter, we had a whole house filter system put in. In 2 weeks after that, I had no water. The water department did come up to help me out, as I'm the one in charge of all this. My husband is disabled. And they wouldn't touch the new filter, because if they broke it, they're responsible. But they advised me. And this is the filter after 2 weeks. It was supposed to be white. Looks like someone's charge card there. It was supposed to be white, and that is 2 weeks. So after an increase in the water bill, being told to run the water to clear the brown water, and then you pay a sewer fee in addition to running your hose to get rid of it. I also didn't think, as other people, that your graph on complaints, other than picking up a couple of gallons of water, if you took my address and maybe that considered a plane. I know my neighbors haven't really complained up on Second Cliff, so the suggestions of a town-wide survey of who has brown water and when would be good. My other comment, you said that the water consumption during the summer really went up. Well, what's going to happen when Greenbush, Hatherley Road, Stockbridge, and 3A get online? How much water does that equal? Can't we make those developers pay for some of our new miles of new pipe?
One thing I want to make sure, just so you understand, I like the idea of a survey. We do have it online for SurveyMonkey, but if that doesn't work, I'm happy to say that we should be sending out a survey and hope to get responses from a large percentage of people, because clearly that's the information that we're looking for. Again, I implore you, take a look at the survey online. If that's not good enough, then let us know. And I'm happy as a board, I think our board would be happy to say, we'll send it out even in the mailings to people at the addresses, just to get some feedback. Thank you. This gentleman here? What's that? Developers.
The developers?
Okay. Do you want...
Answer her question about
the Water Resource Committee.
I'm going to answer the question. I just,
the Water Resource Committee.
Questions left and right. I just want to make sure we answer it. That was one of the ones I wanted to make sure that she understood, okay?
The Water Resource Committee is actually working on a proposal that they will bring to the board for exactly what that young lady just talked about, that a developer who wants to come to town will have to provide funds to offset their water use somewhere else in the system before they will be able to hook up. They haven't brought it to us yet. I know they're working on it 1-to-1, 2-to-1. Those kind of what they're discussing. But they would have to do something along those lines to, in a sense, create their own capacity in water before they'll be able to build. They haven't finished it yet, but we're expecting it shortly.
This gentleman down here with the hat.
Do we have more questions on the developers? I don't want to cut anybody off here. Okay, well, we'll get back to it. Andrew Boyle, 36 Station Street. One big thing I wanted to start off with is one thing I haven't heard. We've heard a lot of data. We've heard a lot of really good things about manganese and other words we didn't understand. One big thing that I haven't heard from anybody since this whole thing started is, I'm sorry. a little bit of empathy. I understand the words are nice. Everyone says, oh, we all want clean water. That's different from taking responsibility for an issue that is plaguing the town that people are obviously upset about. That's number one. Number two, when did this issue start, and when did we start fixing it?
I'm happy to answer it, but do you want to answer it?
If you want, you're the chair.
I'm not picky, so.
I just want to have a chance to say something. It's finally nice to meet you in person, for one.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
So I can't answer all of the questions, but I can say, as John said at the very beginning of this, everyone up here has experienced this too. So the empathy is from our own experience. So yeah, we're all sorry. You're sorry. We're sorry. We all want this fixed. This is a community that wants to get it fixed. As far as when did problems start getting addressed, John outlined that as well, that it became serious in 2010, 2013 is when we started allocating serious resources to correct the problem. And as John has said before, this is a problem that has plagued this town for a very long time, and it was, as he said, a Band-Aid approach before. We're very serious about it. We're all committed to it. We called this meeting so that, ideas like the survey or figuring out a better way for us to address the problem can be addressed. That's the whole point of this. So we really do value everyone's opinion on this, and we want to try to fix it as quickly and responsibly as possible.
No, and I understand that, and I appreciate you saying that. I saw that. I think 2013, was that the right number where we started doing the remediation? But it seems like the problem predates that, but so do three of the people sitting up here. So I'm wondering if we can't get the pipes replaced, maybe we should be replacing personnel.
I've been on the board longer than everyone up here, and the thought when I first came on the board was we weren't going to flush, we weren't going to drain the standpipes because of the infrastructure. They're afraid of what might happen. I thought we averaged one break a week. It was 100 breaks a week, I was told. I was sadly mistaken. Every time I turned around, my friends in the water department worked night and day going to repair leaks. So the old town administrator, not Tricia, but the old way of thinking back in the day was to keep our water rates down, don't flush pipes. Pigging wasn't even a thought on anybody's mind. Replacing really wasn't either. So if you want to blame someone, you could probably blame me. I'm the senior person up here. But at that time, we were told, what we thought the best thing to do would be to save money. So here we are, eight years ago when Tricia Vincasi came in, we had to address the problem. It got worse and worse. My first few years on the board, I don't recall it being that bad. I don't recall getting the calls until the last 10 or 15 years, and then it got real bad. And I'm one of those people too. My wife gets it all the time. So I know where you're coming from. So we're trying to do the best we can. We were told 8 years ago, Tony and I and John looked at each other and said, well, let's fix it. Well, we're trying. It's a lot like the sewer. We're trying to fix where we know the oldest pipes are, like the sewer, where the breaks are, first. Try to get the biggest bang for our buck. So we're going to continue that process, but it's really quite simple. It's how much money do we want to spend? Do we want to put this project first or not? And that's up to, it's not up to us. We listen to you. So, right? Thank you.
Gentleman in the back, please.
Bernie Westerveld, Harborview Road. I wonder if the gentleman from Ty and Bond can show, they had a picture with a map of the town and they indicated that showed the logged complaints.
Yes, Michael, can you show that? Do you have the slide, I guess you could say?
Bernie, if I can just address that, if you're seeing differences from what he has, that's what we have recorded in our office that people called. If somebody notified you on Facebook that they had it, people mightn't have called, and we mightn't have had the data point to log into our system.
I just find a staggering difference in data points. I have probably about 100, 150 data points on my map based on one question on Facebook. I know people have asked the water department to fix the brown water, and a lot of those people are here, and I see probably about 200 people here, 250 people here. I don't see 250 dots on the map, and I know that every single one of the people with brown water, at least at one point, has called the water department. Where's the difference?
I think, has everyone here called the water department? Every single person. So I see maybe 20% raising their hands. I've gotten water, brown water, 2-3 times a year. I never call because most people get it mildly. They run their water, it's gone the next day. The woman that showed those photos back there, I've never had it that bad. And I feel bad for you having it that bad. And I don't know, like John said, do you have it every day that way? Is it a day and it washes out? I don't know. But those conditions need to be addressed. But most people don't identify it. That's why we've talked about putting a link on our website so that you don't have, it's easy to do. You click on it, you put your name, your address, what color's the water so that we can track it. But most people, this has been going on for 50 years, at least. Most people kind of expect it to some level. They know it's going to go away in a day or so if it's not like the woman's back there, and they don't even communicate with it. So I know we track every call that comes in, and we keep the data on that. And really that's the best that we can do in terms of getting data. And it's all available. It's not hidden. It's there for everybody to get and everyone to see. So I wish, I guess I could say this, whoever the man is that walked to the back there after he said he was going to run for selectman next term, I wish there was a button we could push to fix it. There's not. We want to. We've tried as hard as we can. Everyone says make this project first. It is first, but there's 10 other first projects too. The town has the ability to multitask. So we're doing everything we can. Those people that work in the water department are doing everything they can in the water department. The people that work in conservation are doing everything they can do in conservation, and that's what we have to do. But we're certainly not proceeding with something because we want to delay the process of fixing the water. We are you. We're not the bad guys, as maybe some people up here would think we are. We have brown water too. We want it fixed as quickly as possible. And if there was an easy answer, we'd do it. But unfortunately, there's not. And, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but brown water's not going to go away completely. It's just not. It's in our water aquifer. What we want is it to be controlled. We want to have a flushing system in place that keeps the lines as clean as possible, and that it only occurs during those instances that we know it will. There's a fire, there's a water main break, there's something that everyone understands. The woman that just got up said, I understand, you get it when you're flushing. But it doesn't happen regularly, and it doesn't happen to the degree that some of the people are getting. So I we could do more. I just don't have the magic button to push to fix it. So we hear you, but there's just not an answer that you guys are going to get tonight that's going to say you're going to have clean water tomorrow, unfortunately.
And if I may, one more question. What is the procedure if somebody calls in brown water? What happens?
Good question. Sean or Kevin?
What's the procedure?
Kevin.
Here, Kev.
Bernie, I'll just address a couple of the questions that came up. A lot of people call to the water department and say, I've got brown water. They don't give an address. They don't give a phone number response. We get a message. Believe it or not, we get a lot of messages on the answering machine that we pick off during the day, and we also get them in the DPW office also. You'd be surprised. can't tell you how many times people call and complain that they have brown water and don't leave any information. So that's one of the things we do request, more information like we spoke about before. And the other thing, I just want to address one of the other gentlemen that came up is, you know, our people emphasize with the brown water, we're producing a product, and we want it to be the best product available. Sean, any of the water operators, the distribution guys, if they come to your house and they got brown water, they're not just ignoring it. I mean, they feel bad about it. They really, really do. And I've actually had talks with the guys. This is deferred maintenance. It's been built up over the years. It isn't anything anybody caused in the past 5 or 10 years. We're trying to fix the system as soon as possible. So I just want to bring that out there. The guys making the water and the guys out doing the pipe and everything, turning the services on and off for the summer residents, are doing their best at it. They're also finding leaks all the time. We're constantly doing leak detection. And, you know, if people come out to your house, they feel for you, and they want to fix the problem. I just want to bring that up. And I'll let Sean explain how they track the water calls.
Like Kevin was just saying, a lot of my guys are very frustrated and feel really bad when they come to your homes because it's not, occasionally we win one. Occasionally we come out, somebody calls, we log the complaint, we offer to come out to pull their meter and flush their service line to see if that will help them. Occasionally that helps them. Sometimes they call 2 days later and say it's right back again. We also usually crack a hydrant nearby in that location to see if there happens to be, you know, a slug of brown water stuck right near their home. And sometimes we find that. Sometimes we find that we run the hydrant very slowly for 2 hours and it goes clear. And the people are ecstatic. We've had a recent customer call and couldn't believe that we came out the very same day to address the problem. And even though a week later it was back again, they were thankful that we're at least trying to do something about it. So there are steps that we do. You know, we take each case individually. Our workload is pretty heavy at times, so we can't always make it out immediately. But we do try to follow up on all the complaints, or as many as we possibly can. And I can't, you know, we're not perfect. We don't make it out to everyone. We do have staff who live in town and who really feel bad when they go to some of these homes and they can't give them a date like you're asking for right now. When is this going to stop? You know, that's why we're here. I think the SurveyMonkey, I think gathering intel so we know where the best spots are to do some of this ice pigging, followed with flushing, is going to be the way to go. I can't give you a time frame, but we do try to do our best at addressing the complaints.
And finally,
Bernie, you said one more. Hang on, I'll get you another question. Let me get to some of these other people, okay? Because I see a huge line here and a bunch of people behind you. So hold that thought for the second round, okay? This lady down here, please.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Milena Davidova, and I live at 142 Country Way. My question is about the samples. Are they taken at the tap, at the other end, at the source of coming into the house? When people call in a complaint, are they asked to collect the sample for DPW, or is that tested independently for toxins? Because obviously, whatever is tested outside of the home, I mean, they said it's safe, but I don't know if it's safe what I see coming from my tap, so.
Thank you. Sean?
We don't normally go out and take a sample and bring it to the lab due to the volume of calls that we get. We have had homeowners send out samples and have them tested and forwarded the results to us, and they have actually still been within the parameters, DEP parameters. That's certainly something, you know, I can entertain, something we can talk about, you know, whether we want to start taking some samples and sending them out. Maybe that'll help us decide where to start, where the best places are to start.
And I want to say to the lady up back who showed one of the photos that looked like coffee, I'd be like, sure, we'll sample that. I mean, I just want to make sure that people, we've done it before in the past, be happy to, just to make sure that people are confident in making sure what they've got. Going to go up to Allison. Allison.
Thank you. Allison Short, 129 Branch Street. While the map is still up, could you point out where well 18 is, please?
Okay. I'd rather just tell you, it's by the golf course, and I'll tell you why. It's a public safety issue. If we identify the wells specifically, if we identify the wells specifically, since 9/11, we're worried that somebody could go to the wells and contaminate them.
Perfect.
But it's in the golf course area, and the 5, we've got 5 and potentially 6, which is the Dolan well, which is in North Situate. If you want to go to the water department and talk to them specifically,
I was just
we can
curious what
certainly
part of town
identify
it
it.
was in. I have a second question. You talked about paving the roads after the pipes had been replaced. Was the original plan to only pave what had been dug up for the pipe?
Correct.
That's what the budget was for?
Correct.
So then you said instead you paved curb to curb?
Correct.
Where did that extra funding come from?
Kevin, you want to specifically address it?
So what we, sorry, very loud. What we did is we leveraged our Chapter 90 money and some of our town money for roadways to follow up behind on the water projects to do curb to
Could you
curb.
tell me what Chapter 90 is, please?
Chapter 90 is some of the state money that we receive for paving our roads. So we use that in combination with the money that comes out of our budget to follow up behind the roads so that we could do the full depth paving. We were hoping in some of the streets that we would be able to pave just the areas that were damaged and we'd be able to get away with it. For example, like Curtis, if you get down Curtis, you actually kind of
Which Curtis? There's 3 of them.
Curtis right by the highway barn.
Okay, Curtis Street.
By the postie.
Okay.
So if you go down that, and after the yellow lines are in and everything, it's not as noticeable. There are other streets where it is more noticeable, and the board brought it up to us, and, that's what we did. We reallocated funds to cover that.
So it was money specifically allocated for paving? It wasn't money that was going to be used for pipe repair?
Correct. We did not take money from the pipe fund.
Okay.
If that's a question.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
This gentleman here, please.
My name is Randy Gawley. I live at 24 Lads Way. And I had some questions, if I could think out loud a little bit, for the source people. I know something about wells. This is all unconsolidated material. It's outwash. It's not unusual to find manganese layers in outwash. One of my questions is, I've looked at only a few of your wells, but it looks like none of them are restricted. As soon as they hit high water, they start to pump. Have you gone, I'm thinking out loud again, I heard somebody say from Ty and Bond that they didn't find high iron, which was positive in that you didn't find high iron, you find high manganese, which is a really good thing, meaning that the iron would be deeper. You could go deeper, and maybe some of these wells need to be looked at a deeper depth, because sand filters is not really the answer. Your pipes are already screwed up. You just said that you never flushed them, you never fixed them. So your system's all backed up. And as long as you keep pumping bad water into a bad system, get little holes in a pipe like that, you're going to have bigger people in here complaining. My question is, have you hit bedrock on any of your wells? Have you tried to go and see how deep the manganese layers are and get below them? Because I've hit good water on wells before, and a lot of water, and they say, well, this is what we want. I say, no, because it's a secondary standard, and DEP doesn't care about secondary standards. They're still dealing with they're dealing with other things. They don't care about secondary standards. But what people see sometimes is the biggest risk and concern. I hear it in here. They're all stressed out, or what are they drinking? My question is, have you gone deeper? Have you looked at going to bedrock and finding what kind of water is there? Have you hit iron layers and gone below the iron layers?
Kevin, Sean?
So first of all, I just want to say you seem very knowledgeable and, might want to consider looking into the Water Resources Board and volunteering some time. Not that we're trying to volunteer for it, but secondly, out of the wells, we've redeveloped 5 of our wells this year. In the past 2 years, we've redeveloped them after the drought. We received some money. So basically what that included is if our well went down to 80 feet, we still stayed at that 80 feet. We might have put a new screen in, a new pump, cleaned everything out, backwashed the pump, backwashed the well. We didn't re-drill the well. It's just all cleaned up, and what we have is what we have. We don't have the option of going down to bedrock for those 4 particular wells. The one well that we did have some leeway with is the satellite well that they were talking about, and we re-drilled that well probably about 12 feet next to the old well. And what we did with the drill is we went down as deep as we could go until we found a good trough of water where the water was coming in from. Each well, we're only allocated to take out so much water by the DEP per well unit. So we're stuck. I could go to bedrock, like you're saying, and get 600 gallons per minute, but I'm only going to be allowed to take out what that well is rated for, which is 150 gallons per minute, which is out of our water permit. I don't want to simplify it or say it, but that's something that we do look at. The new well we did put in, we used some new technology. We used these new glass beads that are around it. We included the glass beads. It's supposed to improve the water quality and the draw. We've also treated some of our wells with pantonite, which is supposed to help fight off manganese and iron byproducts coming into the well. So we tried that, and we're looking at all sorts of different ideas.
I was going to ask you about the corrosion control, but when you went deeper, the politics of DEP I'm totally familiar with. They only want you to take so much water, but the better water is deeper. And dealing with the corrosion control is expensive. Dealing with the sand filter is expensive. You somehow, 80 feet is not deep. We'll drill wells in Western Mass 150, 200, 250 feet deep. And I'm talking in the area where the Quabbin is, and people really get upset when you talk about Quabbin water out there. But Boston wanted their water, and they got it. So I'm familiar with deep water. 80 feet is where your manganese is. You need to get below that in order to get these people not to be yelling at you, because when they say in the summertime that you're getting more, it's because you've drawn your water down to where that manganese layer is, and you know that that's where it is, and it's going to precipitate out more. It precipitates at a certain layer. As you get deeper, it gets colder, and when the water's colder, you're not going to get that same precipitation. That's why that manganese layer is where it is. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 layers of it. You need to get through that and get into that deeper water, and don't tell DEP.
Thank you. That was a very good question. I want to thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes. He was kidding about not notifying DEP. As a town representative, we obviously are obligated to, but I will say thank you.
So just one comment on, I am not a hydrogeologist, and I haven't studied all the wells in town, but I was involved with the Well 22 replacement project, and that was a small spot, right? So it's a little peninsula with an existing building. So you're in the same aquifer, or we call it a formation, and we put the first well, the test well, where it was a good place to put it, right? Where it was convenient to design. We drove the first well, we got nothing. We got dirt. So we had to do another well, and we looked at the borings and we looked at the formations. It's a non-homogeneous, you're correct, it's an unrestrained aquifer, but It's sort of like a Snickers bar. There's pieces that are not water bearing, there's pieces that are water bearing, and that's one of the reasons why, like we discussed, that your well numbers go up to 22, but you only have, what, 6 wells? It's because so many, this is not great well territory is what I can say. You can't guarantee that by going deep you're going to hit something better, and we don't just stop because we want it to stop. You're looking for that water-bearing aquifer. They designed the screen very specifically to draw that water, and I was surprised. It was, for such a small spot, you think 10 feet away it's going to be exactly like it was there, and it wasn't. So we had to do, another test well to find a better location.
The manganese will stay at a certain location. Precipitate out the lake, it's a very thick lake, and there find something below that. Right now, it sounds like you're right at it, 80 feet.
Well, that particular area isn't a high manganese strong well, so we weren't as concerned about that location. If it was one of the other wells, maybe, if we were over by the golf course redrilling that, we might look into that about going deeper. So everything's taken into consideration when we're looking at a well. I hope that helps. That particular well, we don't have a manganese problem. So, no, I appreciate it, and that's why we're all here. We all want to think out, and if there's other ideas that people have or other grant opportunities, by all means, let us know about them, and we'll see what we could do about them. I mean, if we can apply for something else and get some money, by all means, we will.
Going to go back to the lady in the back.
Great, thanks.
Yes, please.
Andrea Carson, Pondview Avenue. I have 2 questions. One first touches on the water supply and the fact that I've lived here probably 7 years now, and every single summer we seem to be running low on water, some worse than others. So what is the plan to not run out of water? Is it just drilling more wells? Do we need a bigger reservoir? How is that we are always short on water, and then half the town has brown water? That's my first question. Then my second one touches on health.
Sure. So I can at least address 2 things on that. About 8 years ago, probably 10 years ago, we were looking to expand our wells, Pope's Pond and Green Pond, Pope's and Green's Pond. We found out the yield was not extraordinary, and we ended up not buying the property. That's off Old Oak and Bucket. Right now, I believe, John, you're involved, right? If I'm not, maybe I'm mistaken. Yeah. Expanding the reservoir right now, raising it up with the gate through DEP so that we have more surface water to do it. So that was recently passed at town meeting this past April. And by increasing the gate or raising it, it's going to give us an additional 30 days of surface water that we can use. I know that's not necessarily the answer, like, how can we further increase it? Certainly, if there's property out there that we can find another well and buy, we'll do that. And we'll bring it to town, both through CPC funds, to utilize that, to try to defer it. Otherwise, we'll do it through the water department with the enterprise fund.
And I'd like to just say, I realize that this problem has been going on for a long time, and you all here at this table kind of bearing the grunt of decisions made in the past that I know I didn't live here for, but I realize that. I think that a couple things. When I came here tonight, and again, I've heard about this brown water problem since I moved here 7 years ago. So when I came here tonight, realizing that this meeting was happening because it is so bad, I thought there'd be a lot of solution options on the table that we would be talking about, not, hey, should we do a survey about this through SurveyMonkey, which is so simple. So that, I guess, is my number 1 issue. Secondly, the health concern that I think all of us feel, right? I know it's being tested. You guys are saying it's safe. I am not doubting you. But I would say there is absolutely no way drinking brown water out of your faucet is safe. And if it's not in your faucet, sure, go somewhere and get bottled water. Okay, but what about when I do buy my fish at the fish market that gets brown water, and they clean their fish there, and then I go buy it? And so if this has been going on for this long, I've got to imagine there's some health concerns. So if the town didn't have the foresight 10 years ago, or whenever it might be, to put enough money aside to fix this problem. Do we now have the foresight? Is there some sort of money being put aside for a liability fund once people start suing because we are all going to get sick?
You know, I'm not going to be flippant, okay? You're making presumptions. If the water you pull out of your faucet violates DEP and EPA, the regulations, then that's a problem. But we haven't had that. Nobody's come in and said, this is in complete violation. You're frankly, this town is terrible water. DEP gave us a letter, literally. And why? Because basically the board wanted to say, tell us, DEP, what have we been doing wrong? And everybody, if you want a copy, we'll put it on the website. You're free to have it. Just to say that the town has been proactive. The town hasn't had violations for safety purposes. If you believe there's a safety issue and you feel that this water is awful and that we're not telling you the truth, that we're hiding stuff, I don't know how to convince you. But that's the reason why I rely on the professionals who've been hired, who have the degrees, the consultants. And at the end of the day, if people feel that they have something and they're going to sue, they're going to do it. And there's not much this board or the town's going to do. We're trying to actively do this. When I got involved, to take my personal time to get involved with the town, I did so because I wanted to try to help things along. I was not aware of the water situation. More concerned about the schools with my kids, more concerned seawalls, where people were worried for health and safety because the seawalls are a $70 million problem that we're chipping away at because of the storms. People were complaining about expansion on the sewer because the sewer treatment plant and the problems. I have to tell you, there were so many problems with the town because of deferred maintenance, and for whatever reason it did or didn't happen, I'm not here to blame. We're here to try to fix it. And as much as many of you may think that's not the case, I'll tell you, get involved. Yeah. You'll find it out. And so that's why I say to you, you know, if you don't believe us, then I don't know how I'm going to convince you, but we're willing to work with you to try to figure out if it is a safety issue. And we've been told it's not.
So I'd like to answer a couple of parts to your questions, which is the planning of it and what are we doing about it. So we've all heard about the $22 million that is in process, the last phase approach for next spring. But there are multiple other facets. As you heard tonight, it's a very complicated problem, so it's in a phased approach. So I'm just going to read a couple of things that have already been identified and have already been brought forth through the Capital Planning Committee, and that will continue to get to the top of the list that comes before all of you every special and annual town meeting, just so you have a comfort level that there are additional things here. So there's another $16 million worth of projects that have been identified to address not only water quality, but also system and equipment replacements. Whether it includes continuing to clean all the water lines, emergency generators and backups at our wells to make sure that they're properly functioning. Again, water quality, cleaning the lines, upgrading well 17A, repairs to the water treatment plant to the tune of $10 million. Again, cleaning water lines, you know, you see it's ongoing, and it's up to $16 million more that our water department, Ty and Bond, and the board has identified that needs to be done. But the true fact is that you can't do it all at once. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. If we could, we would.
It seems to me, and I totally understand that and get it, but it seems to me this problem's been going on for decades, not all of a sudden this meeting tonight.
Correct.
So, and you know, I've lived in a lot of different places, and I've heard people up here say this problem happens elsewhere, but this is the first time I have ever seen it happen, right? So I feel like we're doing something wrong, and I'm not trying to blame anybody. It seems to me if it's been going on for decades, these little, I guess, Band-Aid solutions, they're not it. And okay, yes, sure, I will definitely get involved. You'll be my next call tomorrow. But
so we share your frustration. And that's why we said at the beginning, this board accelerated it years ago when Tony and John and Sean and some others started to address and accelerate it back in the 2010 timeframe, and through the process, permitting, taking it through. Government, unfortunately, works slowly, to the frustration of everybody up here on the board. We've got to go through permitting, you've got to go through state and federal. It's not easy. But I also want to add that brown water is the #1 issue for us, but unfortunately, it's not the only issue that has been neglected year over year over year that this board continues to try to address. And it's our responsibility to take all of those different issues together and put together those plans before you, the people, and you decide. And I think that that is what this board has been very diligent in doing, is bringing forth the issues and the solutions. And then at the end of the day, it's up to you, the ratepayers and the taxpayers at all the different town meetings. There are more people here tonight than are typically at our annual town meetings. So keep showing up and keep helping us to move forward to start addressing this.
Absolutely. One very last question. It came up earlier in the night. For the specific brown water problem, is there a project manager? Who's the point person?
Because it's, Kevin, it's the Department of Public Works, which is then with the water department. So we're not going to the building department or the town planner or the director of planning and development or Board of Health, because it's a construction. We're dealing with those professionals that have been hired. And then obviously with consultants, obviously we have consultants to take a look and give us some advice, but it's managed through the Department of Public Works.
So it's a group, it's not...
So I'm the overall director of the DPW. We have engineers that work for us, and we came up with the plan on what to do. And we work with consulting engineers also on how to address it and where to go and what to fix.
Gotcha.
Is that the question here? And we actually
I guess I was under the assumption, and possibly incorrectly so, that there was an actual, committee or point person who was dealing with just this problem. And it seems to me if you're the director of the entire DPW, that wouldn't be you, because you've probably got a lot of projects you're working on.
We do work on a lot of projects. We've been working on seawalls, we've been working on sewer, roadways, quite a bit. But we manage the water projects, and it keeps us busy.
And we also have the Water Resource Committee. People who asked to be appointed. Martha Cook is here, and others, and that's a committee that I encourage anybody who's concerned about the water, because we take their advice seriously, and they help us out, whether it's conserving water or whether it's planning also. Gentleman down here, please.
Sorry, Paul Wilson, Damon Road. I think most of us, or maybe I'm speaking out of turn, realize that you guys are trying to do your best with a problem that's been around for a long time. My question is, looking at the maps on the in front of us here, with the 9% of piping that's left to be replaced down around Turner Road and that area, also with the construction that's about to start on Hatterley, is there a way to have, instead of having 3 different projects going and people paving roads and going through the whole process, is there one way when all this construction is going on to coordinate something, expedite it, and move forward, instead of paving roads, digging them up, going it all over it again? And once that's completed, then maybe there's a way to go and get the picking done and get the flushing done and everything else. But we still have the issues with all the pipes down around Turner and everywhere else. We just seem to be pushing all the water around in one big circle, and we're not solving the problem at all.
Paul, Kevin, can you please address the redundancy?
We try extremely hard not to pave a road that we're going to dig up again. That's one of the main priorities. We look and we rate roads. We rate them under different circumstances, the usage of the road, the amount of traffic on the road. Is it an artery road? What's the condition of the water line underneath it? What's the condition of the sewer line? And that's how we evaluate. We also look at our water lines and see if they're in the next 5 to 10 year plan of what we do for replacement. And we try to pick and choose which roads we pave prior to that. Is that kind of where you were going with the paving, or?
I don't know, maybe it's a bigger government question like everything else. You know, it seems to take forever to get the process done. And, you know, it just drags on and on and on. I know we realize you've got to go through permitting and everything else, but instead of having one crew laying pipes, let's get 10 crews out and lay the 10 streets.
Well, you know, I'll bring back a couple of years ago, we did over 8 miles of pipe in town, and we probably had more people coming into selectmen's meetings complaining that every road was ripped up, nobody could get from one section of town to the other, because we did have it all dug up. So we've got the ability. We had 3 water projects going at the same time that particular year, and it was crazy. But you know what it also does? It puts a huge tax on our water department, because when we have 3 companies doing water projects like that, I need to have people with the water department. We don't let them shut down our gates. We shut down all our own gates. We also monitor what they're doing and make sure the tie-ins are done correctly, and I have people from the water department there. It was becoming such a tax on the guys just trying to keep up with it. We weren't able to do other things. We weren't able to, if you called and want your house shut off for the summer, or for the winter, we were slow on doing that. We were behind by, say a month at that point. Normally we're a lot quicker because we had so many guys focused on the water replacement. Plus it takes up a huge resource from our engineers. We can do it if that's what needs to be done, but it's a huge draw on everything we have.
I guess it's frustration. It's just trying to expedite the process and move forward.
We understand. And the other thing that we do is sometimes if we're doing that much building at one time, in construction, we're tying into different pipes, that's when people get a lot of brown water, because it's like what we try to do is when our tie-ins are, we try to minimize the amount of impact onto the customers with each project. If we've got 3 projects going, and some of them had 2 to even 3 crews going, at one point we did have 8 crews running around out here putting in new pipe. You mightn't have realized it, but there was a company up in North Scituate, there was somebody in Minot, there were guys over by the Rotary, there were guys on, Hollitt Street. They're just all over the place putting in water line and doing replace. And it does. It's taxing on the system, on all our manpower and resources too.
Well, now, do you think those 9% of pipes can get fixed this year?
Well, our plan is to go out into the spring, in bid in the spring. Now, what was kind of explained earlier is it wasn't done this year. Part of the reason it wasn't done, it's not just because of the gas line. We were finishing up that project and getting ready to go out to bid. During that time, we get hit with a lot of storms during that winter section, because we like to do our work on the bidding is go out and bid in the winter. We get the cheapest prices possible. If I bid, say, in January, February, March, a lot of these developers are sitting there, our contractors are sitting there going, what are we going to do all winter, or all summer? How are we going to keep our guys busy? And when we get hit with Peggotty Beach, we lost the whole water line on Peggotty Beach. So we went into a scramble because now we've got houses that don't even have water connected up. So we worked out a quick plan. We ran a new water line over there. We connected it. We put a couple guys out there. We organized it, and we did the work. We got the water reestablished. It reestablished that whole loop at Peggotty Beach, which is great, but that helps the flows for everybody, because the more loop the water is, the better water quality is for everybody. So what happened is, and then we started doing all the FEMA work, which was a priority because we have to get that stuff in as soon as possible so that we can get some reimbursement. We just didn't have the bandwidth to finish up getting all that work, so we could get out to bid this year. We were too strung out, because the guys in the water department that would typically be looking at the valves and saying, we're going to shut down this valve, and they go out and check the valves to make sure the valves work and check everything. We're over at Peggotty Beach helping with the water line and with the water services. So, that's one aspect of what occurred. So yeah, we would have loved to have had it done this year. And our plan is to have it go out in the spring and get it all squared away.
Lady in the back, please.
Hi, Pat Collins, 385 Country Way. My question has to do with the wells that this gentleman brought up. What are our neighbors doing that is so different than we're doing? Marshfield doesn't have this problem. Cohasset doesn't have this problem. Norwell doesn't have this problem. Is our topography that much different, or our groundwater that much different than our neighbors? And if not, maybe our neighbors are doing something that we should be doing.
I can speak for Norwell. Norwell actually has had brown water problems this year. Don't ask me why. That's where I live. We have had brown water problems this year. As we mentioned, Hull has had a really bad brown water problem. They were on the news. When I was getting ready to come here, Channel 4 said, we're going to talk about a town with brown water. I'm like, oh, God. It was Norton, and then it was Andover.
Yes, I saw that too. But no, my question is, if we can learn from other communities what they're doing that we maybe have not thought of doing, or they're doing it differently than we're doing it, in drilling our wells maybe a little bit deeper to prevent this manganese and iron problem.
It's not a single answer. Some of them have different water supplies than we do. They're a surface supply as opposed to a well supply. Some of them, their infrastructure is newer. Cohasset's much smaller than we are in terms of getting this stuff done. I know Duxbury uses green sand filters, which takes the iron and manganese out. So we do look at what other towns are doing, and we do copy what they do. But each system is also unique, so we have to deal with what we have. But, no idea is a bad idea. We'll look at everything, what everybody's doing. There's no egos in this saying, well, we're smarter, we're better. If someone has an idea, we'll take it, we'll use it, we'll do the best we can to try to get this done. But each water system is different, so it's hard to say why they don't, we don't. But I can tell you, Norwell's had brown water problems this year because it's becoming an issue.
Well, I know I have lived in a community where we had to have private wells. This was years ago in the 70s. But we had to drill way down below hard pan and everything else to get clean water. And it just seems like a very good idea.
I just want to add a comment to Jim's point about learning from other communities. First off, and I meant to say this earlier, I came on board less than a year ago, and I spent a lot of time getting to know our departments and coming up to speed as the new member of the board. And our team in-house is phenomenal, but they also know when you need an expert to go to these guys who have worked in other communities so that they can apply their expertise from other communities. So that piece of it, I think this team is doing a really good job of saying, okay, what is Hull doing about their problem, those sorts of things. So that is a really important thing. And one of the benefits of this kind of forum is, we can only know, we work really hard every day to address problems, but when, somebody in our community was filled with very smart and experienced people that do other things, bring up an idea like, what are we thinking about with digging the wells? I know these guys have thought it through, but as a board, it makes me say, maybe we should do a cost-benefit analysis over whether we do the filter versus going deeper. I don't know the answer to that, but this kind of forum is excellent to bring those to our discussion as well. So thank you for participating in that.
Gentleman down here, thank you for waiting.
Hi, Jeff Clark, First Parish Road. I have two questions, two very simple ones, I hope. On the strategy slide, it looked like the first two bullet points, one was replacing the cast iron, and the second was the sand filters. Is that right? Okay. The cast iron, so let's assume the cast iron replacement happens in the spring and everything's great with that. How long until all the sand filters are in place, and is that the plan? Is that like the second step?
Kevin?
So the sand filter on that source is the plan that's in the work. We've already spent a lot of money on working towards that. We did an analysis a few years ago. We've actually been out there sampling. We brought a test system out there to run the samples through the green sand. I spoke to a couple residents on Tack Factory Pond Road because that's near where the well is, and they remembered back 15 years ago when the town used to run that well. They get nothing but brown and black water. So we looked at some different aspects of what we could do with the green sand filter, and we were coming out with clear, concise water. That's a boost to the system. If we have that well running, it makes up for the other well that's over at the golf course that we're not running because of the higher manganese. So that gives us a little more flexibility. We want as much flexibility as we can with the water because just like anything, it can be the middle of the summer and all of a sudden your pump could die or your well could collapse. We need that flexibility so that we can provide water. You know, and that's kind of where we are. We're already looked to the point where the green sand filter is going to go forward. You know, it would have been great if we could have gone deeper, but you know, that's we came up with the results after doing our evaluation.